Hello and welcome back, and thanks for watching. Recently, when running some workshops, it became obvious that a lot of people struggle with trying to come to grips with the interface in Photoshop and have trouble understanding what the tools do and where to find things. So in this new series of short videos, I'm going to try and explain each of the main aspects of Photoshop in a short, easy to understand form, so that all of those people that are struggling with trying to understand it can hopefully get a head start. So let's jump in with part number one. This is what you'll see if you open Photoshop for the first time with a fresh installation. And of course, Adobe being Adobe, they set Photoshop up not with the most appropriate settings. You have to go in and customize the workspace. So let's just walk through where the tools are and how it looks, and we can then modify it from there on. Firstly, at the top you have the main menu items that then, if you click on each of those, it will reveal a number of different options, much like many other programs. Down the left hand side we have a toolbar that contains most of the tools that you're going to use when you're editing your images. But bear in mind that a number of these tools you are never going to use, and there are some you should definitely not use because they've been superseded largely by other ways we can work with Photoshop. But certainly the tools are on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side of the screen we have a series of panels that contain information based on what tool we're using and what adjustments we're doing to our image. And then to amend the workspace, as I said, you open or install Photoshop. Its default workspace is a thing called Essentials, which has not really got all the right tools in the right places. And so you can go through and you can modify it by selecting the photography workspace, which gives us a different layout on this right hand side. So that's where we would start off with, and then we'll modify the workspace to customize it to make it much more user friendly. So let's have a look at that now. So here we are in Photoshop. I've reset the photography workspace to its default settings, which is what you will see when you set this up. And you can see that we've now got some different tools, and the most important thing that we need to work with in Photoshop is the layers palette, and that tends to take up a bit of a smaller space at the bottom of the screen. But there's a couple of things we can do right from the get-go. There's a lot of information in these panels that are useful to us, and what we can do is we can make this panel much wider and larger so that we can see exactly what we're doing, and that will squish down our photograph workspace a little bit, but it's still going to give us more than enough for what we need. Now, based on this, I want to see more information about my layers palette. So what I'm going to do is my adjustments panel, I'm going to just grab hold of that, move it, and just dock it in here. And you'll see there that if I click on that and pull that down a little bit, all of those adjustment tools are going to be set in there. Libraries, I don't really care about libraries. I'm going to close that group. And the histogram, well, I never use the histogram here. I always use one of the adjustment tools, the curves layer, to have a look at the histogram. But if you wanted to keep it, you can certainly keep it there, and you can drag that down so that you've got a bit more information. And there's a tool called the navigator, so that when you zoom in and out it shows you where you are. But actually I think that's pretty well useless as well. So I'm going to close both of those tab groups, and it's going to give me a lot more space to work on my adjustment layers. So that's the main area of the workspace. And then what we need to do is look at the various tools or groups of tools that we're going to need to have. Now, things like actions we would want to have, and I already have those locked into that little tab. We would need to look at some of you, if you use text in some of your work, you would need to use the characters. But let's have a look at the information display. That's also docked in there. And then we'd look certainly at the layers, and so forth and so on. Now, one of the other things that is in a more recent update to Photoshop is this contextual taskbar, which is this little taskbar that floats down here, which really is in a most inappropriate place. It's really annoying because if you're working on part of your image and you've got this, then it tends to pop over the top of it. But what we can do is we can move that and put that somewhere where it's more useful. So if we come to the little bars on the left hand side of that toolbar and we drag it up, and I like to put it up at the top here, where it's in amongst all the other toolbars. Once I've placed it there, come over to these three little dots on the right hand side and say pin the bar position. That means that that toolbar will always remain up there. So that's got the space working reasonably well. And then once we look at all of our different tools down the left hand side, what we have here underneath the main menu bar is another toolbar that reflects whatever tool we're using. So let's, for instance, say if I was using this lasso tool, which is used to make a selection on an image, when I click on that, I get a number of tools that relate to that tool. If I go down to the crop tool, you'll see there's various tools or information that relates to that crop tool, and so forth and so on, all the way down to the zoom tool or the magnifying glass tool. And it's often handy to have that so we can click on that to make that fit the screen. And somehow my pesky little taskbar has moved itself back here, and we need to lock that in place. So they're the main tools and the main layout that we can then do a few more tweaks to get it working the most appropriate way for working on photographs. Now, just to add to that customization of the workspace, I've made a custom workspace that reflects all of the tools that I use, and you'll see here that there are a number of tools here which relate to the Nik plugin filters and a few other tools here that are not part of this exercise, but they're tools that I use on a frequent basis. And what you can do once you've set up the toolbars and the workspace the way you want it, you can actually create your own workspace. And you'll see I've called this one Michael because that's my name, and you can actually call it go to a new workspace and give it a name, and then it will always pop up and be laid out in that format. So this is the workspace that now gives me access to my layers palette. My information panel or properties panel is here, and that will change depending on what I'm doing. And of course I've got all of my main tools on the left hand side, and as I said, the contextual menus that relate to each of these tools, and plus this little other menu that annoyingly used to float around. It's now locked in place. So that gets us to the point where we're ready to start using some of the tools. But in the next part, I'm going to talk about how we can further customize the operation of Photoshop to make it even more flexible for the way you want to work.